companies reporting to FDA if people have illnesses or injuries from cosmetics. But I have to also say that, John, I was at an industry conference in 2006, and I heard you say to the room full of companies that reporting of adverse effects requirement was part of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetics Act, but that it was something that you got rid of when you were at the head of the FDA Office of Cosmetics. And then you were back in your role as the trade association representative, suggesting that the industry put that forth as a voluntary program. So that companies could tell FDA if people were having injuries if they felt like it. And, you know, those are the kind of typical PR tricks that we see. We've seen it from the chemical industry. We see it from the tobacco industry.
You know, I think I should have an opportunity to comment.
Go ahead, John Bailey.
I mean, the part of the FDA program that was terminated was under a voluntary reporting program that also addresses manufacturers and ingredients. And at the time, under the executive office of the government, there was a move to reduce the burden on industry, to remove programs that weren't gathering any new information. So this voluntary program, because we had been collecting information for many years, was in fact terminated. What we're talking about now is something very different. This is a mandatory reporting of serious and unexpected adverse reactions that may occur. This is very similar to what is required for drugs. And so this would be important information for FDA as they decide how to allocate their resources. That said, in my experience at FDA, there were very few serious adverse reactions to cosmetics, a handful over many, many years. And I think that stands to demonstrate that the risk posed by cosmetics is quite small. So I think that there's a bit of a mixing of apples and oranges here that really don't clearly reflect what's being proposed under the new the proposals that we put forth earlier this week, and that would be mandatory registration of products, mandatory registration of ingredients, and following good manufacturing practices. And I have to say that the past legislation over the past decades has actually served quite well, but I think it's time, and what we have proposed addresses this, to develop a more contemporary approach that has greater federal oversight, and that addresses consumers' interest in transparency, having a federal role, as well as preserving innovation, which I think is a really important point for consumers who expect good and new and products that perform the way they expect them to.
John Bailey, what about this, that over 1,000 substances are currently banned for use in cosmetic products in the EU and the European Union? In comparison, less than 24 chemicals are restricted or banned for use in cosmetic products in the United States.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's often stated, and it really doesn't get into the reality of what happened in Europe. And in Europe, they passed a requirement that all substances be put on a list of banning, regardless of whether they actually had use in cosmetics. And if you look at that list, and you can go to the website and look at the European Cosmetics Directive, Annex 2, and you'll see there are things like asphalt and tail gases and jet fuel and diesel oil and all kinds of things that are simply never have been and would never be used in cosmetics. So to say that there are 1,100, and actually the number's up to more like 1,400 now because of this dumping of materials into the Cosmetics Directive, you'll see that most of it is irrelevant. What is left parallels very closely what happens, what's banned in the U.S., as well as industry practices in ensuring that their products are safe and avoiding ingredients that may have a concern.
Let me ask Stacy Malkan, what about pink washing? You have a whole chapter on that. What does that mean?
So pinkwashing, when companies present themselves as advocates for women's health and the fight against breast cancer and yet continue to use chemicals that are linked to cancer. Annie talks about that in the film, and she mentions Estee Lauder. Revlon, Avon are also companies that have pink ribbon events and give money to breast cancer charities, and that's great. But how these companies could really be champions for women's health would be to stop buying carcinogens from the chemical companies. And unfortunately, we see that all three of those companies have products with high toxicities, dozens of products that rank in 8 or higher in our Skin Deep database, and products that contain chemicals like formaldehyde-releasing preservatives and chemicals that are ethoxylated, which are often contaminated with 1,4-dioxane, and which use in the processing a known breast carcinogen, ethylene oxide, which may be causing worker exposures. And so, you know, we just need to get carcinogens out of these products, and for these companies to stand, the first one to stand up and say they're going to be the one to do it, I think is one that is going to be making the smart move, because consumers do not want to be buying products with carcinogens. And I think those three companies have a particular responsibility to clean up their act.
We're going to leave it there. I want to thank you both very much for being with us. Stacy Malkan, thanks so much for joining us. Not Just a Pretty Face is the title of her book, The Ugly Side of the Beauty Industry. And I also want to thank John Bailey for being with us, Chief Scientist for Personal Care Products Council. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. Anjali, last night we had a chance to go over to the release of Annie Leonard's film, The Story of Cosmetics, and you had a chance to speak to someone interesting there.
That's right. Actress and activist Fran Drescher is supporting the bill introduced by Congresswoman Schakowsky. She's best known for her role as Fran Fine on the long-running former sitcom The Nanny. She's also a cancer survivor and the founder of the group Cancer Schmancer. Well, she was at the premiere last night, and this is what she said.
Hi, I'm Fran Drescher, and I'm supporting the Safe Cosmetics Initiative because I'm a women's health advocate, I'm a cancer survivor, I'm the president of the Cancer Schmancer movement dedicated to living preventatively, early detection. Well, I became aware of the fact that the European Union has much stricter regulations than the United States does, and the European Union had eliminated 1,100 chemicals from their skincare compositions and formulations, and the United States eliminated 11. So I thought, there's something wrong here. And then as I investigated further, I realized that this is a self-regulating industry, which is basically the fox guarding the henhouse. So I thought, well, I am not opposed to certain regulations because I fear that when certain manufacturers given the choice between doing the right thing on behalf of the consumer or compromising safety in the interest of profit, and particularly when they're answerable to shareholders and their profit margin, I suspect that a lot of manufacturers are going to err on the side of greed rather than what's the right thing to do. And that's why we now have child labor laws, and that's why we should have had more regulations for Wall Street and the banking industry to answer to, and perhaps we wouldn't be in this economic crisis today. So, and it was regulations that were put instituted after the big stock market crash of 1929, and then in the 90s it was uplifted, and now here we are in 2010 in another economic crisis as a result. So clearly people where there's money involved can't be trusted. I'm sure that there are people that can be, and they're out there, and they're presently involved in doing green products. But as a general rule, there's too many out there that are not. And so I say that our elected officials who represent we the people need to step up to the plate and support Safe Cosmetics for 2010 initiative. And I will be in Washington personally lobbying for this, and I hope that members on both sides of the party line will support this bill, because this is a nonpartisan issue. This is a human issue, and it affects all of us.
That is the actress Fran Drescher. She plays the nanny. She is a cancer survivor and wrote the book Cancer Schmancer. We're